is, what are you drinking this morning?
Good question. I started out with a Red Bull and then now I'm on to tea. So you can sense my level of energy.
Love that.
I'm actually on the same trajectory, Eunique. I had my matcha latte, which I have almost every other day for an energy boost, which is like almond milk, a little teaspoon of matcha and agave syrup, but I drank all of it because I was like getting ready for today, and now I'm just having water. Getting hydrated. That's where I'm at.
Love that. And if you guys want to put in the chat what you're drinking, we are interested. We'll keep an eye on the chat. So, okay. I'm also going to want to, before we get deeper into the interview, I'm going to preface what we're talking about. At the end of today, we're going to talk about this project we worked on together, which was this coloring book, right? And so before we learn more about both of you individually, I want to share with everybody this coloring book that we created. So, I will say I'm drinking coffee. This is my plug for my friend. She's a beautiful ceramicist in Austin. Her name is Katie Ann. So I'm drinking a pumpkin spice latte and I'm thriving. So back to the coloring book. So we have an installation coming to the museum November 17th by an artist named Leo Villarreal. And Leo is known for working with technology and light to create large installations. So we're lucky enough to have a custom installation that's going to be at the museum starting November 17th. We also wanted to integrate Indigenous voices into this light experience. We're, located in the American Southwest. There's this long history of light being used for creation stories, both in Western and non-Western communities. And so we worked with Vanessa, Eunique, and Dustin, he couldn't join us today, to create a coloring book and a mobile app. And we're going to talk about those and we'll see those later on the screen. But I just wanted to have everybody be on the same page about our end goal for today is to talk about this coloring book. Okay, so Eunique and Vanessa, where are you joining us from today?
I'm at home on my couch. I live in a little bit North Phoenix, sort of uptown area, so close enough to downtown.
I'm in the corner of my master bedroom in my home in East Mesa. This is my new workspace. I actually kind of made it my workspace with, the whole quarantine and working from home now. So yeah, I have been in this space in this little corner, which luckily I have a beautiful window next to me, for every day for a month now. But I'm happy and grateful to be able to work from home. And yeah, that's where I'm at now and almost every day.
Forever.
Yeah.
I see there's a paint swatch behind you. Are you going to paint your corner?
Yeah, it's funny. I know, it's a little swatch. We were testing out colors since the room is all white, and we moved into this house last year, and we've just been putting it off, and so we're trying out colors. I like that color, but my partner Alex is like, I don't know if we should do the whole room blue, so we might do one accent wall. Yeah, that's just a sign of my indecisiveness and putting work off. That's
Love it.
A little representation of that.
Very zen. And then, so what do you guys do when you're not getting interviewed on a Sunday morning? What's your Sunday like normally?
Right. I feel like, so I use my weekends as creative time or organizing and planning time. I have a full-time job designing creative systems for an enterprise, and tech is definitely something that I do full-time. But after hours and on the weekends, I get a chance to create time to touch base with a lot of designers, Indigenous designers that I know. We created a group called Indigi Design Collab, and Sundays are the days that we meet and we figure out like what our next project's going to be, or talking about ongoing projects. So
wow,
Sundays are usually busy for me.
So there's no downtime for you. You're always working.
Yeah. And, I pace myself, and sometimes I'll take, a couple of Sundays off. And we just finished a huge event that we did for Indigenous Peoples Day, where we were playing with art and tech and lights and activating Roosevelt Row space. So that was like, we've been planning that since May. And so the event finally happened. So I feel like now I'm pretty chill. Don't feel the need to do anything major right now. So I'm relaxing.
That's great. Yeah. That's so like that restorative part, right? I think is so important. And Eunique, I've talked to you enough at this point where you're like one of these people, you're such like, as my grandma would say, a dynamo, in that like you do so much and you're always going. So I love that you're taking some time or finding some time to restore, because anytime I talk to you, you're like, you have all this stuff going on. And I'm like, should I be doing more? So I love that. I really admire that.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I move by season. So this is my season to relax right now, or at least take a breath.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Vanessa? I know you're super busy as well.
Yeah, I don't know as busy as Eunique, but yeah, I'm a PhD student and an instructor. So almost every day I'm, either in class, which is now on Zoom, or teaching. And the weekends, I try to keep Saturday like completely like no work. I try not to check my email and just like, not be in front of a screen, spend time with, my partner and my dogs. And then Sunday, like this morning, I made breakfast and we walked our dogs. And then I start to be like, okay, Monday's tomorrow, and I start to prep. Sometimes I'll grade or watch a football game. My team's the Raiders, which they're playing at 1 today. So sometimes at 10. So sometimes I'm watching the Raiders at 10 a.m. But yeah, Sunday's my day to prep and get ready for the week.
And what are you doing your PhD work on?
So I'm a PhD student in the Mexican American Studies at University of Arizona. And so I actually just got my master's diploma in the mail yesterday, which my master's, I know it feels weird because my partner Alex handed it to me when I was on the computer. So he was like, oh, look what came in the mail. And I was like, it's like a weird like ceremony thing where I didn't know, I didn't think, I didn't predict that my partner would just hand it to me, when I'm on the computer. That's how I get my diploma. But yeah, so I got my master's degree in anthropology. And now I'm pursuing Mexican American Studies. Seems like I switch fields for every degree I get. I was in psychology for my bachelor's, anthropology master's, and now Mexican American Studies. It just like basically I switched fields. I feel like I've gotten more refined. And so now my PhD research is actually going to follow the crisis at the border, specifically the DNA testing they're doing of families at the border. It's going to look into the social construction of family, who is considered a family, what does it mean to biologically define a parent and child relationship, because the government is now defining what is family, right? So if someone is at a border facility and it's their grandmother or a cousin or something, they'll be separated because they're not, specifically a mother, father, and child. So I'll be looking into that kind of construction of what family means and how biology, specifically DNA, is defining that. And of course, the government's role in creating that policy.
Wow, that is not a small feat.
I first have to do the actual data collection and interviews. So I'm kind of preparing my proposal now, and yeah, it'll be a year-long project. So I just finished my master's thesis, which was on race and genetics, and now I'll be looking specifically at genetics, race, family, and through a Mexican American Studies perspective.
Wow, amazing.
Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Good work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so we are going to segue into getting to know about you two in your younger years, your childhood, those formative experiences that led you to the path. You guys you're doing lots of necessary and good work these days, and we're interested in knowing, how did you get there? What lived experiences led you to this point? So my question to both of you is, in terms of your childhood, where were you raised? Were you in one geographic location your whole childhood, or did you move around? how did that influence you?
Yeah, I want to say that I grew up in a ton of places, probably until I was in 4th grade. I grew up in Rapid City, South Dakota, Flagstaff, Arizona, Provo, Utah, and eventually ended up in Chinle, Arizona, which is in the Four Corners area of Arizona. But I lived a nomadic life. I feel like I didn't stay in one school and it wasn't until Rapid City was kind of where I stayed for at least longer than 2 years. And so a lot of my education was parsed in all these different spaces, right, in all these different environments. And I remember constantly feeling like I was new to everything. And I think one of my favorite things to do was hug trees, like a long time ago. And because I felt like they were the only things that were constant. And I remember, like, in my preschool days, somebody telling me that if you ever feel lost, to hug a tree and somebody will find you. And so I used to just do that. Like, I used to go and like hug trees, and eventually like made friends. Like, I was okay to make friends. But I feel like having that, I also grew up in the ministry. So a lot of the reasons why we moved around was because my father was a minister, and we just kind of went where the church told us to go. And it wasn't until we ended up in Rapid City that the church kind of just disappeared on us. And the church was not very, there was a lot of picketing happening, right? And this was around in the 80s when a lot of cult-like churches were starting to get big names, right? And you remember those 80s stories of like people, you know, not missing their families and stuff like that. And we were part of that. And I remember distinctly like attending either ceremonies or things where people would come into the church and they would be burning all of their cultural relics because they were termed to be like born again, right? Or they had become a Christian. And so we would attend like all these ceremonial type things where people were burning their regalias, burning their feathers, burning their traditional aspects, because they were told that that's a sin or it's not accepted, and that if they keep that, they would go to hell. And so my brain was so, it had a lot of contrast in it, because in one part, you know, I felt very alienated, and the other part, I wanted connection to everyone around me. And so I was constantly pulling from those two ideas. And because I wasn't allowed to listen to radio, or watch TV, like I said, very secluded, everything was kind of told to me, like what I could do. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I created a lot of my own world. Like I built, you know, tree houses, and like, you know, created like little maps that I would go and find things. And so in a way, it kind of like helped me not be a part of like society in like the regular stance of what the 80s was. People are always asking me like, do you remember this? Like, do you remember She-Ra, or do you remember it? I'm like, sorry, missed the 80s. Like, even though I was there, none of that connected with me. But it wasn't until my parents, you know, saw that they no longer wanted to be a part of something that really restricts you in that way, also doesn't support you as an individual. And so they left that church when I was about 4th grade, 5th grade, and we moved back to the res, because now, you know, we didn't have to jump around, and we moved back to Chinle, Arizona, which is a little town that its population is probably like 6,000.
Oh, wow.
And we had like one intersection, one high school, one elementary school, one grocery store, one gas station, but tons of people, because it was the center of the Navajo Nation. So there's all these different villages and towns that are like maybe 30 minutes away, 15 minutes away, and they would all bus the kids into this one school, because that was the one school for this, you know, huge area. And so I got to meet a lot of people. I felt like in my earlier years, there was a lot of emerging, right? Rediscovering, finding myself, because I grew up outside of the res, and new life, like how, like I would run down the street and go to YMCA, go swimming, you know, be able to do these things, have a little bit of freedom, even though we were really secluded. Mm-hmm. When we moved back to the res, there was nothing. There was like, you know, you're very limited in the options that you have. I finally realized that like a lot of the people growing up there don't really have a whole lot of choice of what to do for fun or even going to the park, right? And then when we needed to get supplies, we would have to travel like 2 hours to get to the nearest Walmart. And so we would make those trips like every week. And so there was just a different way, a different flow of life. And mm-hmm. I had to get used to it. It was like a shock. It was a culture shock. And I was dealing with it very young. And of course, like the cultural aspect within Native communities, there was also a lot of things that I had to work through. A lot of the bullying, right? Like you're not like everybody else. It was the most Natives that I've ever seen in one place. And we were all Navajo. Mm-hmm. They all had the same belief systems. And so like I was the outsider. I was looked at as the outsider. And it wasn't until I found my voice within that group. And the voice was pretty much all about creating, empowering others, but also creating some form of community, even within my little town. And so, you know, my dad was still a minister, but it was like a non-denominational church. And we had this space. And so we would go and we would practice like dances so that we could do it for the prep rally. And we would do plays, we would do theater. I joined drama club. I joined everything I could possibly like experience creativity in. Mm-hmm. And so like I was after school doing all sorts of stuff. And I remember like finally maybe like 3 years into living there towards like my high school years, I really realized that I was so lucky to be back home and to be a part of a cultural community that is fully ingrained with like the story of your ancestors, but then also like how we live today and what are we doing today. Like we would go and we would pick trash up because we were bored. So we would go like along the roads and like pick up trash. And I remember one time we found $20 bills. Wow. And we're like, yeah. And we were so excited. We're like, we're doing this again tomorrow. You might find money. So there was just like, we kept ourselves so busy and it was so exciting, but that was probably a big change for me in understanding where I'm rooted. And then when I left, finally, it kind of, that's where my home is. That's where I go back to.
I love that. That's amazing. So you've been creative since the beginning. I love that that's been part of your journey.
Yeah. I love creating things, or at least imagining things that people don't think of, especially when you're looking at different perspectives. Yeah.
That's awesome. And Vanessa, tell us about, your childhood. How did you grow up? Was it similar, different?
Yeah, I would say it's similar to Eunique. I moved around a lot too. So I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area. My parents actually met in San Francisco, and they're both originally from Mexico. So there's like a constant kind of migration, moving pattern. So my mom's from Sinaloa, Mexico. My dad's from Michoacan, Mexico. And they met in San Francisco in, I think, 1991. Immediately, 1 year later, married and had my older brother. Then I'm born a few years later. And so we lived in San Mateo, which is where my mom grew up. And I think when I was around 4 years old, we moved to the San Joaquin Valley, which is about an hour and a half east of the Bay Area. So I grew up there for a good portion of my childhood, the big childhood years of 5 to, I don't know, like preteen years. And then we moved back to the Bay Area. And then I spent my teenage years and young adult years there. And now I'm in Arizona as of January of last year. So yeah, I'm from the Bay Area, and it's definitely a big difference from moving there to here. Big culture shock. Like I didn't realize how Californian I am until I moved here. But Arizona's gorgeous, and we're happy to be here. And now we're in a home. A big reason why my partner and I moved here is to have more space, to have a backyard for our dogs, and the Bay Area is unfortunately really is experiencing a lot of gentrification, and it's extremely expensive. So, we wanted to have a different living experience, bigger, space to ourselves. So, we had the opportunity to move out here, and we're happy to be here. But yeah, I went back home July of this year, so a few months ago, and we were there for 3 weeks. It was great. It was great to be back home, see my family. It was weird though to see the Bay Area during the pandemic. We went to San Francisco multiple times, and to see the city like so quiet, and social distancing and masks, and we had quarantined and been tested and everything before we went there to make sure when we saw our family we were good to go. I had already had coronavirus at that point. I had it back in March, but it was good to go back home. And we came back in August, and I was like, oh, I miss it so much. I was like conflicted because I was like, oh, I'm happy to be home, be back in our space, but I really, I missed home. I don't know why it hit me really hard when we went back, because I graduated with my master's degree, and during this time, everyone's kind of, reflecting and wishing they were with their families, or, holding the family that they live with close. And it's a difficult time, but happy to have, our home and be in good health.
Yeah, I'm glad you recovered. That's crazy. Like,
yeah, wow. It was not fun.
Do you have, Vanessa, I'll ask you, do you have an early childhood memory or memories that you feel was like pivotal in bringing you to your research and what you're doing now? Or was it just a compilation of things?
I think for like the earliest childhood memory I have is actually living in, my parents and I, my older brother at the time, I was, a baby until 4 years old. We lived in this little 1-bedroom apartment, which was below my grandmother's 3-bedroom, 2-bath apartment. So she was above, and that's where my mom grew up with her 5 brothers and sisters. So she was still living there with, I think, some of my aunts and uncles and cousins. And so like there's this apartment complex where we all basically lived. And so I always had my family close, and every single day, we're eating together, doing laundry, and there was this little park that was behind the apartment complex. And so it was like ideal for us as kids, right? So it was me and my older brother and our cousins. And so we'd go to the park all the time. So one of my earliest childhood memories is being in like the little baby swing at the park, and being like my mom pushing me, and there's actually, I think, a picture of this, and I'm like a super chubby baby, and I'm just like, having the time of my life in the swing. So those are some of the earliest childhood memories I have, is being in that complex with my family around me. And that's what has formed my research and my work now, is my family, my culture, and kind of reflecting on the Mexican American experience, and how family is just so important to us.
Amazing. And Eunique, do you have anything that comes to mind in terms of an early memory that, besides the trees, I love that, I may go hug one later today?
Right. That's the one that keeps with me. I would say like the freedom that I realized I had when I was surrounded by, people that I just feel like the memories that I have, there's so many of them that I was able to make when I finally found my roots. And so there was this one time, and this kind of shows to how daring I am. We used to go and explore. I used to live right beside a canyon. It's called Canyon du Chat. I'm not sure if anybody's ever heard of that, but it's in the Four Corners area, and I lived at the mouth of the canyon.
Oh, wow.
And for my birthday, we used to go hiking, and we used to go into the canyon and try and discover places that nobody else has like been to, right? And that's like your dream, is to find like, a cool place that nobody has ever known about. And I'm pretty sure like, everybody's been around that area, but we were crawling, and I remember like trying to get up like these ledges, and like because the canyon walls get so tall in certain spots, and we started going down this other canyon, and we were crawling down into it, and we found this like enormous wind cave that had like it looked like there was water at one point going through, but the rocks were like totally formed in like this dome area. and it's totally off like the trail, like nobody would ever see this. And I remember sitting there, and my friends were all there with us, and it was like our little secret spot, and we would go to that spot to just hang out. And whenever we wanted, like Saturdays or Sundays were our times to run around. But I just remember, like, now when I think about it, like how far we walked to get there, like it must have been a good 7 miles to walk to this spot. And like, and now I think about it, and I'm like, wow, we just had like the freedom to roam and just to be out there with nature and to find things, right, and to make it our world. And that's something I wish that I could give to my son, because he's so, like, now it's COVID, right, and we're told we have to stay in, and now we're very, very secluded again, which I'm so used to. Like I like seclusion. It's what I grew up in. But for me, I'm just like, I really want him to explore like what's out there. Like the world is so much bigger than just what we think it is, especially in our connections, right? Our internet connections and reaching out that way. So we, yesterday we were in Superstition Mountains for a wedding. And that's when he was like sitting there, like looking around like, oh my gosh, this is huge. Like the mountains were surrounding us. And I was just like, oh, I miss this. I miss being out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. Same. I grew up in Flagstaff. So I, anytime I see a tree, I'm like, yes.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
Go hug it.
Right. You don't realize you miss it until you're surrounded by concrete and buildings. And then, cause I'll be frank, guys, I'm not an outdoorsy person. And then now anytime I go to Flag to see my parents, I'm like, can we just sit outside like the whole weekend? And there is something so literally and figuratively grounding about being in nature and like away from everything and unplugged. So
it's a different sort of energy. Yep.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to move on to the next set of questions, because I know both of you, a theme or a undercurrent in your work you do is activism. And so I'm interested in, I look at things from like a sociological lens of how the, humans and bodies make up spaces, but I'm interested in how your innate interest in communities or being creative in communal connections, how did that then turn into activism, or was there always this kind of activist ingredient in that formula? How did that happen?
Well, I started calling myself a creative advocate. I think that when I left the reservation and I moved to Phoenix in the year 2000, I really didn't know what I wanted to be. I had a scholarship to go to Chicago and go to theater school and become, either an actress or a set designer or something. It was something creative in that realm. And I remember looking at the two pieces, and Chicago was so far away. I saw pictures of the snow that they had and like what they have to deal with. And I was just like, that's a little bit too far for my comfort. Like I've gotten so used to being home, right? And being so near to family and near to the Native communities. And so when I left to move to Phoenix, it was a decision for me to become not the voice, but become a louder voice for my community, because we are so far removed from everything else that when I moved to Phoenix and I moved into Tempe and I got my first job at ASU as a graphic designer, I'm lucky in the fact that I knew creativity is what I wanted to do, and somebody saw that and gave me a chance, and all of a sudden I was a graphic designer at a school like ASU. And it was then that I realized that seeing a lot of my friends, a lot of younger generations, especially going to ASU, were having a really hard time with the culture shock, because the world is built differently and it's at a faster pace when you move off the res, and the access, right? And you've never had access to so many things. That within 6 months to 8 months, most Native college students will end up leaving school and go back home. And that is a big problem, right? Because you want your kids to be able to go off and complete school, complete college. Sometimes they got caught up in trouble because they just didn't know the rules. They didn't know how to live by the certain rules that are out here. And I also remember a lot of people traveling back and forth, like on the weekends. They would go to school or go to work here, and then as soon as Friday hit, they would be traveling back. And because you're young at that age and you're 20 something, you know, or at least 18 or 19, you know, in our own rides and experiencing all this, there was a lot of casualty, a lot of young deaths that would happen, or a lot of, I did have some friends that ended up passing away because they, in the case of suicide. And so the struggle to be a part of like regular society is so heavy on the youth, and there's no real introduction to what the American life is. And then what the goals are, right? Everybody's on these like standardized goals of what, you know, the American dream is. And so there's a lot of people that feel really left behind. And so when I saw that within the school, and I saw the students, they really gravitated to my office, which was really cool, because they would see somebody who was doing what they love to do and what had a job, right? I was also going to school full time at night, so I had a full day. Ever since I moved out here, ever since I've been out here, I've been so busy. It's never really stopped. But I would go to work, regular 9-to-5 job, and then in the evening be at school until like 11:30 at night. Mm-hmm. And that was just my routine. And they would all come to my office. They'd be like, Eunique, can you help us with this logo? Can you help us with this banner? We're going to have the ASU powwow, or we're going to make t-shirts, or our club is going to do this. And they finally had access to something that that was different and outside their normal academic bubble, that I was able to kind of foster ideas and say like, hey, have you guys thought about having a contemporary modern art show? Have you guys thought about readjusting the idea of what art is within the Native community? And that's all I do is ask questions, right? Questions that it's from a different perspective. And they're like, no, we didn't. And I was like, I think you guys should do that. I'll make the banner. You guys set up the event. And that was the first event for the, that happens it started way back then, but it happens every year now for the Native American History Month. Mm-hmm. So to me, like seeing that was an idea and that I was able to implant that, and now it's thriving, and now it's just a tradition, right? And it's carrying on. But it's looking at art, Native American art, like what makes Native American art? Is it the feathers? Is it the cultural aspects within the art? Or is it the artist being Native American? And whatever we do is therefore Native American art, because it's like a genre, right? Yeah. And so just understanding how those genres really box ideas in, box creativity in, and how are we expanding on that? So like modern ideas and versus traditional ideas. And so now I talk a lot about that, and all the work that I do is toward redefining a lot of how we are seen in normal society. Mm-hmm. You know, questioning cultural appropriation, understanding like that our land, our identity, and our language are all connected, and these are the ways that they're connected. So a lot of just like learning for myself, but also teaching others along the way. But I am definitely an advocate and a believer in whatever space I enter, I immediately indigenize that space, because I am who I am, and I will speak up, and I will produce creative either programming or projects that completely twist around what the regular standards are. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how I bend and choose to do different things within the industry.
That's amazing. Wow. That seems like a lot to carry. And I just admire so much that you go into these spaces, and yeah, by just existing and claiming that space, you're able to be a role model and, you know, help these students feel maybe more of a sense of centeredness and belonging in institutionalized spaces, because they're not designed to do that. And so I think that's, I mean, amazing. Vanessa, do you know, have anything to share about how you became, would you identify as an activist? I guess would be my question. And how does your work reflect that?
Yeah, I would say I'm a student of activism. I feel like, you know, I'm young, I'm still learning. I look towards elders and others in the community who have been doing this advocacy work. But at the same time, like Eunique was saying, I've also come to recognize my own power and my own presence in spaces that aren't typically, you know, welcoming or inclusive of people like me, right? I'm first generation. I'm a Mexican American woman. You know, I've done a lot of things in my family and even in my community that haven't been done before. And then realizing that power and also, you know, helping others along the way, whether it's my cousin who's now, you know, joining college or working in museums, which I've been in for 5 years now, and, you know, reaching out to artists and getting to work with artists like Eunique and learning from them, right? And sharing that communal space. So yeah, it's hard. I don't know if I like identify as an activist. I think, especially in my world of academia, there's this talk about being a scholar activist, which I think was great. And I mentioned in my master's thesis about, you know, using your scholarly work as activism, but I don't think it should end at, you know, writing a paper and being like, okay, I'm done, you know, I did my work. I think it's also engaging in community, you know, giving back to the community, especially as a scholar, when you're studying other people's and you're not part of that community, recognizing that, giving them their voice, recognizing, you know, their contribution, doing community participatory research. And yeah, I constantly am thinking about, okay, you know, how is my voice being used? How can I use my platform? How can I collaborate with others? And as Eunique said, how can I decolonize this space? How can I, you know, indigenize this space? So I'm, you know, still working on that and constantly in a mode of learning more, educating myself, and kind of critically analyzing my own contributions and space, you know, whether it's with education, academia, or museums and art, right?
Yeah. I think that's a good point, Vanessa, just about academia, right? And we're becoming more and more open to this idea of co-creative, like authorship and things like that. But I think in a more traditional Western, or, you know, Western European ideological framework, it's, if you do the research, is you have to claim that, right? It's this, there's this inherent need to claim what you're doing for yourself. And it is a big pivot to work with communities in this co-creative framework and understand that this is a productive experience. It's not one person generating all these ideas. It's what's happening in between group A and group B. This is the space where creativity and production is happening. And to claim it is just kind of reductive in the sense of that's not the point of this process, or that, you know, that's how I approach my work. And I see that similarly in how you both approach your work, is that it is process-based, not just in material, but in how you interact with the communities and your partners. And so that was really exemplified, and we're getting closer to talking about our coloring book, but it was really exemplified in how you two worked together and how you created this amazing resource, because it wasn't just filling a need, right? It wasn't like, hey, the museum wasn't like, hey, we need a coloring book, can you make one? It was this like layered process and conversations and meetings, and really thoughtful at each step. It wasn't just we're producing it to produce it kind of an experience. So I do want to transition. We're having such a good talk, but I want to get to your, you know, personal space. If you guys want to share anything from your home space or your studio space and how you work. Our audience is always interested in seeing where you create. So whoever wants to go.
No, that's cool. Yeah, no, that's cool. So I used to have a studio with Megaphone Studios when they were on Central and Camelback. And that was really where I was experimenting with a lot of, I like to play with paper, synthetic paper, metallic paper that looks really heavy, but it's actually really light. And then it catches light when they hang. So I'm going to show you something that I've been working on. It's not quite finished. There's still things that I'm doing, but this is like the area that I that I play in. Because I don't have a studio now, I have enough space to kind of do stuff. So this is like my little art corner, my little thing here. But this is like the paper that I was talking about.
Oh,
it's
cool.
like this really reflective spray paint, and right now I'm working on putting stones on them so they look a little bit heavier, but the stones are the colored stones. And I'm folding the paper, and essentially they'll just hang. And I have tons of these, so I'm making like a mobile style art piece. I don't know what it's going to look like yet, because usually when I'm working on stuff like this, I play around with several designs, and then I'm able to kind of figure out how I want to hang them and how they're going to live in a certain, so it's like more like installation art, like it's made for a specific spot. And I've been doing these for the last like 4 years, and I've done like huge walls where this painted paper like creates these layers and these shadowing, and which is I think why I was tapped for this project, was because I like to play with light. I like to play with concepts where people think things are heavy, but it's actually really, really light and airy, and it's free flowing. So when you walk by it, it moves. I like movement. So I remember explaining this to a friend of mine, and that's when I got a call of like, hey, we're doing a coloring book on light. And I'm like, ooh, that sounds like fun. Yeah, so I play. I like to play. So I have my design thinking, my process, and I love that you brought up about processes, because the indigenous process is completely different from Western process. Western process is very linear, where you have a start and a beginning and then all the research in between. But indigenous processes and indigenous learning is very circular. And so what we do is we learn as a community, and we come back around, and then when we're coming back around, we're reflecting and we're teaching what we've learned. But when you keep doing this, right, in a motion that keeps going, you're constantly moving forward, because you're reevaluating a lot of the ideas. You're telling stories, which is the reason why we tell stories in the season. So everything is very circular, and you know you're going to have to revisit it again. And then that's when you're able to share and give people that experience of what you've learned. And then you go on in your journey and you do some more learning, and then you come back around. So it's always a circular motion.
That makes a lot more sense. I'll be the first to say, you know.
That's why you see me and I'm like, oh, she's like a tornado, right? Or she's like, she's doing something, but there's a process to it, and I feel like I've honed in on what that process is, and I'm able to mimic it in my life.
That's amazing. Vanessa?
Yeah, let's see if I can show my little corner here. Let's see. Okay, so this is my desk, and I have a window. I don't know if you can see my dogs outside. They're playing. But, okay, so I created this space back in August because I knew I was going to be at home all the time working. So I got a new desk. I got this new chair. I have some art up on the walls. I have this little, this is by Jorge Garza. His page is, I think, Quetzal art. And it's like a Aztec Mexica kind of take on frontline workers. In this case, it's a at-home online instructor, teacher, which now I am as well. So I got that piece a few months ago. And then over here we have, let's see, oh, there we go. We have a few prints by Luz Morales. Her page, I think her Instagram page and her Etsy page are Arte es Medicina. So she's a Purepecha artist, which is my dad's ancestral tribe. So I love her work, and I bought a few prints to kind of beautify and indigenize my space. And then I have here in the corner this Dr. Seuss book, Oh, the Places You'll Go, which my coworkers from the Mexican Museum gifted me in June after I left, because I was starting my PhD journey in August. So I have that, a birthday card I got from my partner Alex 2 weeks exactly ago for my birthday. And then another print, I think, by Diana there in the middle. Yeah, that's my space. I'm still kind of working on it, adding art. Yeah, and I think that's pretty much it.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I'll say from my perspective working in the museum, students, younger kids especially, I don't know if it's like Instagram and social media, but kids are very interested in where people are creating. It's less so like the end product, you know, so we think, I think I'm like, oh, we're being revolutionary and like we're talking to people about their personal spaces. But then I have 10 to 13-year-olds come in and they're like, yeah, but like, what are they eating and where are they making and do they have an Instagram?
Yeah.
And so like that intimacy is like expected now in terms of being an artist or being a creative. It's not like, here's my end product, admire it. It's like, here's how I woke up this morning with my hair in a messy bun and here's my 10-step skin routine. So all right, I'm going to ask Andrea to pull up a PowerPoint and we're going to do something. I will share that I stole this entirely from Hot Ones. We're going to explain that gram. We're going to have you guys explain a few images from your Instagram, and then we're going to get into the coloring book. So that's the coloring book. And then this is explain that gram. So the first one, I believe, Eunique, that's from your Instagram.
Yes. Oh my gosh, this brings back memories. So I go back a whole lot. Anytime my family needs me, anytime that, you know, we have somebody has passed away or there's a celebration or a wedding. And in this case, there was a wedding that was way up in the what is that mountain? It's the mountain right that sits in between New Mexico and Arizona, and it's going towards Durango. And so like we were there, and I was in the middle of nowhere, but I was rushing to get back home to a meeting. And I remember when I was coming down, and this is like approaching. This is from like Second Mesa and Third Mesa, and it's coming into Flagstaff. The entire sky, and I actually took a panoramic, so this is a part of a panoramic view, and I just wanted to get the whole scape because it was all clouds, and you could see like sections of the clouds where it was releasing and dumping water, and then others was like super colorful, and the sun was hitting it just right, and it was just this coolest moment. And I remember stopping, and my son was just like, why are we stopping? I'm like, I have to crawl on top of the car to get this shot. I'm like, it's so pretty. So that's a good memory. That to me represented blessings because I was at a wedding. I was able to see, it was a very traditional Navajo wedding. And I got to learn a little bit more about the culture behind the wedding and the process and what had to be done. And so this was kind of like that blessing of like accepting what is, you know, and what is to come.
That's amazing. Yeah, and then for time's sake, because I do want to be able to open it up for questions to the audience, Andrea, do you mind flicking through until we get to Vanessa's Instagram? All right, Vanessa, tell us about this. What's going on in this photo?
That's from my birthday. I actually just mentioned a couple weeks ago. I turned 25, and yeah, we celebrated here at our home. This is in our dining room, which is right outside the door here. And this is me in front of my cookies and cream birthday cake, and my dog Margot is trying to take a bite, take a lick. I'm just like petting her, like, no, please don't ruin my cake. My hand looks huge on her tiny head. But yeah, that's me about to blow out the candles, and we have my partner Alex got me some flowers, and then we got some Dia de los Muertos themed plates and napkins just because I love the holiday, and it's coming up actually next week. And yeah, that's me celebrating my 25th birthday. I think I mentioned in my comment to the photo that, you know, I'm missing my family. And it was weird to celebrate that milestone and not have my parents or the rest of my family here, but grateful to, you know, have a home and work and health. So yeah, it was an interesting day. It was, I know 25, like I wasn't really like thinking that it was going to be a big deal. I don't know if it's because of the pandemic or something. I was like more like, oh, I don't have my family. But yeah, it was a good birthday. I had fun.
Good. I'm glad we, you know, we found a moment of I think, I don't know if everyone, and in the chat, maybe you can share, like, I had a pandemic birthday too, and it is a weird, like, moment of, are we celebrating? Like, is there even a point to this? But then you do it and it does feel so nice, and to have that, you know, ceremony around yourself and your life and your family. And I think the older I get, the more I realize birthdays are more about my family and that connection. Like, it's an excuse or a reason to celebrate just the connection that we have with our family. So it was weird to be a pandemic birthday. All right.
Right.
So Andrea, if you could flick to the coloring book, I'd like to spend the last, 10 minutes or so sharing about this and having Eunique and Vanessa walk us through this resource. So as I mentioned, the museum, these are available for visitors to pick up at the museum if you'd like. There's also PDF versions of these pages at the museum for people to color in our workshop space. So Andrea, can you click to the next slide? This is the inside of the book, and I'm going to hand it over to both of you to kind of share with us, how did you come up with the stories or the sentences you shared and the images, and let us know, what was your process?
Yeah, I feel like it was very, like, meeting Vanessa for the first time and really getting to know her in that first conversation. It was really cool how she basically opened up the platform for us to discuss, like, where these stories could come from. And immediately me and Dustin were sitting there and just like, all these stories, right, that have to deal with light, whether it's the sun and the moon and the stars or the fire, just different ways that culturally we see where those were created. It brought us to like creation stories or stories of ancestral belonging to a land and understanding everything around us, that Vanessa also was thinking about the same thing. And we were just like, okay, cool, we're on the same page. We know that, that this is what we wanted to highlight. And these two pages, I think this coyote one was the first one that I drew. And this was more of an example of what I saw that we could possibly pinpoint as far as like me being Diné, me being Navajo. What did I find interesting about my cultural creation stories? And my favorite part, because I am Ma'idishkijni, so my first clan is Nanishteja Tachitni, and my second clan is Ma'idishkijni, and Ma'idishkijni is the Coyote Pass clan. Oh, wow. And it is Hema's Pueblo clan, but it's also in the story as the Coyote. There's a lot of reference to like the Coyote people, and or like, how the Coyote is seen as a trickster and sometimes very funny and very playful. Like he's like a joker, right? He plays jokes on people. He's a messenger, but he's a messenger that could fool you, so you got to be aware of him. And this picture is about when he through the leftover pieces from Changing Woman's or First Woman's carving of the moon and the sun. There were all these little tiny rock pieces, and he was getting so bored by them putting each little piece in the sky one at a time so that they made like a perfect design. He was like, this is taking too long, and he grabbed the rug and he threw all the rest of the stars up, and that's why the Milky Way is there. And so I wanted to draw the Milky Way and have that story of him looking at it like, oh, it's a beautiful mess. So that was kind of like my representation of how I think there's a source of design and everything coming together in a very balanced way, and that's what we call Hajon. But then there's a little bit of chaos, and the chaos is what makes it very unique and very it's emotional, right? And it's an emotional feeling, and that's what the Coyote brought to this story, is his emotion. And it created something awesome.
It really did. I love that Coyote.
Yeah, he's cute. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was fun. I feel like this was a really fun way for me to explore the different ways light can interact. And then of course you have First Woman on the other side, and she's carving out the moon and the sun, and the sun was hoisted up into the sky from a mountain, And so that's why I put the mountain there, put a little bit of a curve to it because I wanted to show that she was like larger than, you know, in our mind, she was larger than life. She was the first woman. And then of course the clouds. And when you start to read into the story, especially during story season, all of these different pieces are parts of the story. And so this is just my idea of like putting them all together in one.
And what is story season?
Story season is from the first frost that lands like where you're at, and then till the springtime. So the first, I believe it's the last time of the snowfall. There's like a certain timing, right? And you have to watch for it because it moves depending on what the season is. There's not like a real date to it. It's kind of a visual thing or a feeling thing. But in that time, there's a lot of references to the string game. So within the winter season, it's mainly winter season that's the storytelling season, but it's also the time where we can play a string game. And the string game is like, I'm not sure if you guys have ever played Cat's Cradle with a string. So that is called our string game, and that's a traditional game. And you tell stories, and they make pictures according to what story that they're telling. And so there's different shapes and different images that are taught by our grandparents or like my mom. Like I can make a rug. There's one that I can make a rug, and then there's other ones where I can have the coyote jumping over a fence, and like, so there's all these really cool things that allow kids to be able to be a part of the story. And it's within that season that you can do that. And as soon as the season's over, you got to put it away. Can't tell really the stories in full length anymore until the next season comes.
Wow, amazing. Andrea, can you click to the next slide? Vanessa, can you walk us through the app that's going to accompany the coloring book?
Sure. Yeah, and I just wanted to say about the coloring book as well, and of course with the app. It was just such a joy to work with Eunique and Dustin. I was also like reflecting right now on that first Zoom the meeting that we had together. I think it's like May or June. And we had like almost a 2-hour long conversation, and I had like some questions, you know, like how should we approach this? I was thinking, should we do, like scientific kind of STEM approach, or should we do, you know, I had these ideas. And then I said, oh, well, what about, you know, stories or light? I just had like kind of not refined ideas. And then Eunique and Dustin just had all these amazing ideas. I remember like rapidly typing on my computer, trying to like absorb all their knowledge. And we immediately like, oh, our idea's formed. We're going to do traditional stories. And yeah, the coloring book, like they sent me the images as we were going through the process. And I was just like, oh my God, this is incredible. So working with them has just been amazing. Like it was just such a incredible experience to collaborate with them and feel like, you know, I'm just kind of designing and laying out their beautiful work. So same with the app. I took inspiration from, of course, the coloring book. And initially the idea was to like use little snippets from the traditional stories, but in respect of the winter storytelling time and discussing this with Eunique, we decided to do kind of more of a introduction to the different tribes that both Eunique and Dustin are a part of. And so, yeah, I mapped out this different points on the ASU Tempe campus to where, you know, it's meant for people who are listening to the app to kind of reflect on the physical space that they're in and look to the different cardinal points of the ancestral homelands, you know, of the different tribes that are mentioned. I believe the first western point is Akimel Otham and Maricopa Peeposh peoples. And so I think I do the voiceover for that one. So mentioning, you know, the ASU Tempe campus is on their land, and, you know, that they're still, you know, here and taking care of the land and acknowledging that, you know, we're on their lands. And then it goes to the southern point, which I believe is the Yaqui, and Eunique did the voiceovers for all of these except for the intro, and she did such an incredible job. I just like sent her kind of like guiding points and you know, things to kind of touch on to review the history of the different tribes, and just a little snippet. I mean, it was really difficult for me to kind of narrow it down and do a quick overview, but she did such a great job. So southern point was Yaqui, which Dustin is, and then I think Eastern Point was Pueblo, and then we have Navajo, of course, with both Eunique and Dustin are part of the Navajo Nation. And yeah, it was awesome to kind of put the coloring book into this different mode of creativity and access for people to learn more about not only the traditional stories, which you can kind of see certain coloring pages that we feature within the app, but also hear Eunique's voice and have the experience when you're, on the campus at ASU to walk through and kind of reflect and think about, being on native land and learn more about these native tribes and nations.
Amazing. Yeah. So I think that's the design component I was teasing. We have this beautiful coloring book that's very thoughtful, and then we have this mobile app that is a great addition to get people moving through this, space and understanding the geography and the connections of ASU, being on this land, what that means, having people reflect on that, and learning more about these communities. We are at 11:05, so we have 10 minutes. I do want to open it up for questions from the audience. So I would encourage anybody, if you have a question and are comfortable, feel free to unmute yourself and turn your camera on so we can see you. Or if you'd like to type a question in the chat, I can give that information to Eunique and Vanessa. I'll ask a question. Eunique, what is your favorite story from the coloring book?
I think it was that one that was the first page, the one that you guys chose for the cover, just because it had so many details, and when you actually read the story or hear the story in the longer version, you can sense that she's not doing all the work herself. Mm-hmm. She has her community around her, and she has her advisors, and she's asking questions and then instructing people and kind of leading, which kind of reflects to me on how our community, Native community, Indigenous communities are matriarchal societies, and that women really steer the direction of our communities. And so with that, like I empower myself with that and kind of feed into that, because that's like what I am. Like, I feel like I am a person that loves community, that wants to create community, wants to be a part of different communities, but how can I also integrate who I am to be a part of it and steer direction right into good conversations, into life change, into conversations that change perspectives, but also give people that opportunity to learn.
Amazing. Brittany asks, do you see the app evolving over time to include more spaces? Vanessa, what would your thoughts be on that?
Yeah, actually, Eunique and I talked about this, about kind of doing this first stage of the intro, right? Kind of introducing people to the different, tribes that are, here in this land and the homelands that, are nearby. And, but, we didn't include the traditional stories themselves out of respect. So I'd love to include more information about, the tribes, and if it's possible to share the stories, or, I think it's definitely something to build upon, because I think if you go through the app, I think the voice of the narratives are about like 3 minutes long. So either building on the narratives themselves or adding even more spaces, maybe expanding to different campuses, ASU campuses, because there's 4, right? And we're just including Tempe in this one. So yeah, I definitely see the app as like kind of the beginning, like just starting off, and it's definitely something to build upon. So I think it for sure has it like laid the foundation. It can certainly have more content. And if Eunique's willing, or, you know, we can expand, because Eunique does such a good job. Like, I was listening to her audio narratives that she sent me. I was like, this, I feel so soothed. You have just like a great you have another area you can go into, Eunique, if you want to be more busy.
Oh, great. Thank you. Yeah, give me another avenue. That's what I need. No, I honestly, I was going to suggest, I was like, this app is so cool, because I'm definitely into the tech and into, it would be really cool to see some sort of scavenger hunt done in the winter time. And like, you follow the app, and if you went to a certain place, there's an actual storyteller from that tribe that is able to tell you that, right? And that's the whole reason why these storytelling seasons are so important, is because you get a chance to meet a person that is totally ingrained in the root of the story and understanding all of the different aspects of teaching within the story. And so when you have them there, it's like a special moment, because this storyteller is literally holding the majority of our oral tradition. And we are very orally traditionally rooted, that not a lot of these stories are written. You can find some online, but when you actually get to hear it from a person who has a perspective, right, and has their own belief and their ceremonial understanding of it, there's just a different way of hearing how everything came to be. And there's such a deeply rooted that it happened. It happened, and this is the story that we're carrying on to tell you that this is why we exist, and this is why we're here. So I think that would be a really cool thing to kind of see play out if it were ever possible.
Love it. Let's do it, Eunique.
Love that. Well, we're at 11:10, so if there aren't any other questions, I want to thank Eunique and Vanessa for joining us today. I also want to thank you for all your hard work, your thoughtful work, you know, for creating these great resources for the museum and for our communities. I will ask Eunique and Vanessa both before we leave. I want you guys to shout out your other projects. I know, Eunique, you have a company. Vanessa, I know you have something you're working on as well. So I would love for you guys to share that. And with that, I will wish everybody a happy Sunday.
Awesome. Well, if you want to find out what I'm doing on the community level, not just a personal designer, company owner, but you can follow IndigiDesign Collab. We are a group of Indigenous designers who decided to come together and create impactful design and art and begin to create that space, but within the Roosevelt Row area. And so a lot of partnerships and collaborations are happening with other Indigenous people who are also expanding on this idea of revitalizing the Indigenous perspectives and talking about it and creating those conversations in modern day spaces. So go ahead and follow us. That's kind of our next project. Hopefully will be in November for Native American History Month. So.
Yeah, for myself, I have my personal Instagram, which I think was featured in the our Instagram portion. So it's at Vanessa Moreno 1011. I haven't been too active on Instagram lately because I've just been so busy. But there, I kind of post about you know, my PhD journey and my process through, you know, a first generation you know, Mexican American you know, experience in the PhD program at U of A. So that, you know, if you're interested in my, you know, journey in the Mexican American Studies program at U of A, there's that. And I also have another Instagram page that I co-founded with my friend Yazzie Fajardo. It's at Somos Chicanas. And right now we're taking a break because we're not too active. Yazzie unfortunately had coronavirus back in June, and I had it back in March. So we both kind of have been hit with COVID-19 and are recovering. And we had like this period right in between, like after I started to recover and right before she got it, where we were super active and we're creating this. We're like, let's use this pandemic to be, you know, creative and start this page. And so the whole point of Somos Chicanas is to talk about Chicana culture and our journeys through the museum world and the art world and academia as well. And so we started that. right now we're kind of on a hiatus because of Yaddie's recovery and my recovery as well. So, you know, we hope to start that up again soon. We created some content that you can check out on the page. But yeah, feel free to follow me on Instagram personally or our page and check out, you know, what's to come. There's definitely more in the future.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. My last task I'm, you know, giving everyone as homework is go find a tree and hug it. Get yourself centered. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.